The vanishing island that only shows up on maps 300 years ago, 2+ hours of mysterious islands, hidden in the endless stretch of oceans, scattered across the far corners of the earth, lie islands that seem to exist only when someone dares to look for them. Some vanish as you approach, others linger in maps and stories long after they've disappeared. Sailors whispered of lands shrouded in fog, of shores that promised riches but delivered only confusion, and of visions that blurred the line between reality and myth. Across centuries, explorers, cartographers, and mystics have all tried to pin them down, yet the waters themselves appear determined to conceal their secrets. Their secrets have puzzled generations, and the stories that survive are only fragments of what truly lies beyond the horizon. Watch closely, and you may uncover the mysteries that have eluded even the boldest explorers. Bermeja, the island that Mexico lost. Maps from the early 16th century often carried more than geography. They held promises of wealth, danger, and the unknown. Off the northern coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, cartographers recorded a speck of land named Bermeja. For centuries, it appeared in nautical charts as a solid presence, a reference point for sailors navigating the Gulf of Mexico. Its coordinates were repeated in maritime logs and scholarly atlases, yet for all the time Bermeja seemed to exist on paper, no one could firmly place a foot on its soil. The earliest references describe Bermeja as a modest island, its edges barely rising above the waves, its shape changing slightly with each mapmaker's interpretation. Spanish explorers in the 1500s mentioned it briefly as a waypoint on the way to Campeche, noting only shallow waters and sandy shores. No harbours, no settlements, no signs of native life were ever recorded. Yet the island persisted in maps for over 300 years, stubbornly refusing to vanish even when repeated expeditions failed to locate it. Stories from sailors who attempted to find Bermeja are fragmentary and curious. Some claimed that a morning mist would cloak the area entirely, leaving only a sensation of dry sand beneath imagined feet. Others described glimpsing a red-tinged shoreline, a hint of ochre colour that would vanish when approached. In these accounts, the island seemed less like solid ground and more like a memory shaped by desire and expectation, an entity that existed at the edge of perception rather than in the tangible world. Scientific surveys in the late 20th century sought to confirm Bermeja's existence using modern sonar and satellite technology. Each expedition returned with the same frustrating conclusion. There was nothing there. No reef, no shoal, no trace of land that matched centuries of cartographic evidence. The Gulf's depths were measured in meticulous detail, yet the coordinates that once marked Bermeja only yielded unbroken water, silent and indifferent to the history it had held. Geopolitical intrigue has added another layer of mystery to Bermeja. Its location falls within an area rich in oil deposits, prompting speculation that governments may have had a motive to erase the island from public awareness. Some theories suggest deliberate cartographic manipulation, a strategy to influence territorial claims. Others propose that errors compounded over centuries, with early mapmakers misrecording positions and subsequent generations blindly copying these mistakes. Despite intense study, no definitive explanation has emerged, leaving room for imagination and suspicion alike. In the lines of old nautical charts, a whisper of Bermeja's existence still lingers. Atlases from the 18th and 19th centuries show it in slightly different forms, sometimes larger, sometimes smaller, its outlines smudged, as though hesitant to commit to reality. These images have captivated historians and cartographers who marvel at the persistence of a phantom island. They study the meticulous notes of surveyors and navigators, attempting to trace how an invisible land could shape the understanding of an entire region. Local lore in Mexico adds subtle echoes to the island's enigma. Fishermen tell of currents that behave strangely in the region, waters that pull and churn without visible cause. Some elders speak of seeing a faint rise of sand at dawn, only for it to disappear by noon. These accounts are fleeting, anecdotal, and impossible to verify, yet they align eerily with centuries of maps and logs. The intersection of legend, observation, and recorded history gives Bermeja a presence that is both insistent and untouchable. Bermeja has also inspired philosophical reflection on the nature of absence. Scholars have used it as a case study in perception, memory, and the authority of maps. How can something be so universally documented yet never observed? The island challenges assumptions about what it means for a place to exist. It is a reminder that human knowledge, no matter how thorough, can be incomplete, and that some truths may hover just beyond the edge of certainty. Today, the waters where Bermeja supposedly rose remain calm, the gulf stretching endlessly, offering no hints of the vanished land. Modern technology can detect reefs, shoals, and underwater ridges with incredible precision. Yet Bermeja continues to elude detection. It occupies a unique space in history, straddling the line between reality and imagination, between tangible geography and the world of maps that record what may never have been. Somewhere beneath the waves, the memory of Bermeja waits, as though the ocean itself has absorbed it, holding onto a secret that no chart, no sonar, and no human curiosity has yet been able to unveil. Hy-Brasil, the island that appears every 7 years. Legends of Hy-Brasil have drifted across the coasts of Ireland for centuries, carried by sailors' tales and whispered in village pubs. Unlike ordinary islands, Hy-Brasil was said to emerge only briefly, shrouded in mist and visible only once every 7 years. From a distance, it appeared as a dark silhouette on the horizon, a low-lying mass of land rising from the sea, as though the ocean had suddenly decided to yield a hidden fragment of the world. Early records from the 14th century reference the island in navigational charts, often accompanied by vague notes about its fleeting appearances. Some maps labelled it as a place of treasure and mystery, suggesting that those who reached its shores would find fortunes beyond imagination. Mariners, however, reported a more unsettling reality. Attempts to approach the island often ended in frustration, as Hy-Brasil would vanish just as the crew thought to set foot upon its sands. Fog seemed to be Hy-Brasil's most faithful guardian. Sailors described a low-hanging veil of mist that rolled across the waters, distorting the view and making distances impossible to judge. Sometimes the island's outline would appear sharp and clear in the morning light, only to dissolve into nothingness by afternoon. Observers recorded strange optical effects, noting how the sun's angle could render the island visible or entirely hidden, as if it were playing with perception itself. Some sailors swore that the mist itself seemed alive, shifting to hide the island whenever a boat drew near, as though the sea were conspiring with the air to keep Hy-Brasil secret. Accounts from the 17th and 18th centuries suggest that there may be more to these optical illusions than meets the eye. Some explorers reported seeing structures on the island, dark forms resembling dwellings or towers, yet no expedition ever confirmed their presence. Skeptics dismissed these sightings as mirages or the result of longing and superstition. Still, the persistence of these reports across centuries has lent Hy-Brasil an air of uncanny consistency, a place that exists in memory, expectation, and fleeting observation simultaneously. Local fishermen often added personal testimonies to the lore. One account tells of a boat drifting toward the horizon where Hy-Brasil had appeared, only for the waters to smooth out and reveal endless open sea. Another described seeing lights on the island at night, flickering like lanterns, though no one could explain who or what might have set them there. These anecdotes suggest that the island's disappearance was not merely an occasional trick of nature, but something almost deliberate, a land that eluded human intrusion. Stories passed among coastal villagers spoke of travellers who thought they had reached solid ground, only to find their footsteps met with empty water, reinforcing the idea that Hy-Brasil belonged to another reality entirely. The name itself carries a whisper of mystery. Brazil may echo the Irish word for blessed, though some interpretations link it to a legendary hero or lost civilization. Writers in the 19th century speculated that Hy-Brasil was a remnant of an ancient, forgotten culture, a place that had survived the tide of time and the erosion of memory. Others imagined it as a portal to an otherworldly realm, a fleeting window into a dimension where land and sea obey different rules. Scientific inquiry has attempted to reconcile the myth with reality. Modern mapping, satellite imaging, and hydrographic surveys have found no evidence of land at the supposed coordinates of Hy-Brasil. Oceanographers suggest that natural phenomena, including rare optical refraction, floating fog banks, and distant currents, may have created the illusion of a solid island. Yet even these explanations fail to account for the repeated sightings over centuries, the consistency of descriptions, and the reports of structures and lights that seem to have no natural source. Artists and writers have long been drawn to Hy-Brasil, capturing its enigmatic nature in sketches, poems, and novels. In these depictions, the island is both tangible and spectral, a place that tempts and vanishes, leaving an ache of longing in those who imagine it. Its presence in folklore has inspired a fascination that goes beyond geography, touching on human desire to find places untouched by ordinary time, spaces that resist mapping and conquest. Even today, the waters off the west coast of Ireland are patrolled by sailors and adventurers, some hoping to glimpse the legendary island. On rare mornings, when the sea is calm and the fog hangs low, a faint shadow may appear where charts show nothing. It stretches briefly across the horizon, a dark promise that some land still lingers beyond the edge of perception. The shadow disappears, but the memory of Hy-Brasil lingers, as if the sea itself refuses to let it go. Palmyra Atoll, the island of bad luck. The waters surrounding Palmyra Atoll are deceptively calm, a turquoise expanse dotted with coral reefs that shimmer beneath the surface. From above, the atoll appears almost serene, a cluster of green islets hugging shallow lagoons. Yet beneath this tranquil facade, a history of misfortune and disappearance has earned Palmyra a reputation among sailors as a place that rejects the living. Historical records from the 18th century hint at Palmyra's early notoriety. Whalers and traders navigating the Central Pacific spoke of ships vanishing near the atoll, never to be seen again. Logs recount sudden storms arising without warning, pulling vessels into swirling waters that seemed determined to claim them. By the 19th century, the atoll had become infamous for its association with maritime disaster, a name whispered cautiously among those who plotted courses across the Pacific. Stories of the island's bad luck intensified in the 20th century, particularly in 1974, when a brutal double murder shocked those who studied Palmyra. 2 men, intent on claiming its remote shores, were killed in a violent altercation whose circumstances remain unclear. The island's isolation made investigation difficult, and the murders were enveloped in rumour, suggesting that Palmyra itself had conspired against the intruders. Some locals claimed the atoll had always been inhospitable, a place where human presence unsettled the natural balance, leaving disaster in its wake. The geography of Palmyra contributes to its eerie aura. At low tide, jagged coral reefs stretch outward like the spines of some enormous sea creature. The sandbars shift unpredictably, and underwater currents create pockets of turbulence that seem to appear and disappear without pattern. Mariners have noted that these conditions often make the approach hazardous, even in calm weather. Many who have ventured close report a sense of being watched, an inexplicable tension, as if the atoll itself registers the intrusion. Wildlife on Palmyra offers further clues to its unsettling character. Dense coconut palms and towering ironwood trees dominate the landscape, their shadows falling over abandoned camps and shipwrecks. Birds circle in uneasy patterns, and the water teems with creatures that lurk near the reefs, often hidden until it is too late to avoid them. Researchers who have visited the atoll describe an overwhelming feeling of solitude, a quiet that is too heavy to be merely natural, as if the island itself holds its history like a living memory. Historical accounts emphasize the atoll's stubborn refusal to be tamed. Attempts to establish settlements or exploit its resources were consistently abandoned. Coconut plantations and temporary camps failed, with crops destroyed by storms or disease, and workers leaving abruptly, citing misfortune and an uneasy feeling that clung to the land. Each abandonment reinforced the growing notion that Palmyra carried a curse, though no one could articulate its source or mechanism. Palmyra has also drawn scientific attention, largely for the paradox between its ecological richness and its perilous reputation. Botanists, marine biologists, and historians have documented the atoll's unique flora and fauna, recording species found nowhere else on Earth. Their notes describe a place of natural abundance that seems almost protective of its solitude. It is as if the island allows life to flourish only in ways that do not invite humans to interfere, preserving itself against the intrusion of civilization. Tales from passing ships continue to colour Palmyra's legend. Some crews have reported sudden fog banks that obscure the atoll entirely, or waters that churn with a ferocity disproportionate to wind and tide. Lights have been glimpsed on shore where no one resides, and strange noises, cries, splashes, or indistinct thumps sometimes echo across the lagoon. Whether these are natural phenomena or the echoes of the island's dark history, they serve as reminders that Palmyra remains a place apart, governed by forces both tangible and unseen. Despite the attention it receives from explorers, historians, and scientists, Palmyra Atoll retains an air of mystery that refuses resolution. Every visit leaves traces of its past misfortune, reminding observers that the island is not merely a physical location, but a force with a temperament of its own. Ships may sail, researchers may land, yet the atoll's reputation endures, shaping expectations and guiding caution with subtle insistence. Even when the sun rises and the waters calm, Palmyra's shadow lingers, a silent warning that some islands are better left alone. Frisland, the island invented by cartographers. European maps of the North Atlantic in the 16th century often featured an island named Frisland, depicted as a substantial landmass south of Iceland. Sailors consulted charts and navigational tables that indicated towns, rivers, and harbours, yet no vessel ever confirmed its existence. For more than a century, Frisland occupied the space between recorded reality and imaginative geography, a phantom island born of ambition, error, and the authority of maps. Some historians trace Frisland's origins to early cartographers who relied on second-hand reports from fishermen and mariners. Descriptions were inconsistent. One account noted fertile plains and villages, another hinted at jagged cliffs and treacherous shoals. Over time, these conflicting details were smoothed into a single, cohesive island on the maps, lending credibility to something that may never have existed. It became an accepted reference, an island that appeared in print and on parchment long before anyone had navigated the waters to confirm it. Some chroniclers even claim to have seen rivers flowing with unusual clarity and forests populated by unfamiliar birds, details that no later expedition could verify, yet they persisted in written accounts as if insisting on reality. Mariners' logs occasionally reference the island with a mixture of certainty and unease. One 17th century captain recorded a failed expedition to reach Frisland, claiming that persistent fog, shifting currents, and miscalculations made it impossible to locate. Another noted a land so certain on the charts, yet absent to the eye, remarking on the growing suspicion that Frisland was a construct rather than a destination. These entries reveal the tension between recorded knowledge and lived experience, a gulf that Frisland seemed determined to expose. The island also occupied the imagination of the wider public. Atlases circulated across Europe, showing Frisland with settlements, rivers, and forests, inspiring wonder and speculation. Artists sketched its supposed coastlines, and writers incorporated it into tales of maritime adventure. For readers and explorers alike, Frisland represented a boundary between the known and unknown, a space where human perception and cartographic authority intersected to create something simultaneously authoritative and illusory. Travellers' tales suggested Frisland might hold hidden treasures or lost knowledge from earlier civilizations, a notion that fueled expeditions as much as the charts themselves. Errors in early mapping techniques likely played a role in Frisland's persistence. Surveying tools were imprecise, longitudinal measurements were difficult, and reports were often exaggerated or miscommunicated. Once an island appeared on a prominent map, later cartographers tended to reproduce it, trusting the accuracy of their predecessors. In this way, Frisland became entrenched as a geographic fact, even as the ocean itself refused to reveal its presence. In the minds of sailors and mapmakers, Frisland exerted a surprising influence on navigation and exploration. Some voyages were planned with their coordinates in mind, leading ships into treacherous waters in pursuit of land that did not exist. Logbooks record frustration and confusion, with captains noting hazards that seem to align with the imaginary contours of Frisland. In some instances, the Phantom Island caused detours that affected trade routes, maritime strategy, and even the perception of the North Atlantic as a domain that could be systematically charted. In some cases, ships reported encountering treacherous shoals or ice where Frisland was supposed to be, leading to speculation that the ocean itself had absorbed or concealed the island. Frisland's disappearance from maps was gradual. By the late 17th century, surveyors and explorers began correcting earlier errors, marking the island as doubtful or eliminating it. Yet, even as it vanished from official charts, Frisland lingered in the collective imagination. Scholars and map enthusiasts continued to debate its origins, tracing how a place born of human error could exert such enduring influence on navigation, culture, and perception. Some modern interpretations suggest that Frisland may have been inspired by real landforms seen under unusual conditions, such as icebergs, fog banks, or misidentified islands. Others argue that it represents a unique case of imagination taking physical form through authority and repetition. Whatever the explanation, Frisland remains a cautionary tale. Maps, though instruments of knowledge, are also vessels of uncertainty, capable of creating places as convincingly as they record those that truly exist. Although long disproven, Frisland continues to draw the attention of collectors of antique maps and historians of exploration, serving as a lesson in how human error and expectation shape our understanding of the world. Its legacy is less about a missing island than about the power of belief and the interplay between observation and representation. Each reproduction of its outline on parchment reminds viewers that some spaces are defined not by their physical presence, but by the conviction of those who record them. Across centuries of cartography, Frisland's shadow persists, a testament to how maps can create places more lasting than reality. Taongi Atoll, the island of ghost lights. Nightfall over the Marshall Islands brings a stillness that feels almost unnatural, a pause in the movement of waves and wind. Among the scattered atolls, Taongi stands apart, small and uninhabited, yet it carries a reputation that has intrigued and unnerved sailors for generations. Visitors report strange lights dancing over the lagoon and low-lying sands, flickers that appear without source, moving as though guided by unseen hands. Records from early 20th century naval surveys first noted these phenomena. Officers described luminous glows on nights when the sky was cloudless, lights rising above the water and then vanishing with the tide. No one could explain whether the illumination came from natural phosphorescence, the reflection of stars, or something far more elusive. The accounts were recorded with precision, yet they conveyed an eerie uncertainty, a sense that the atoll itself resisted full comprehension. Fishermen from nearby islands have their own explanations, rooted in centuries of oral tradition. Some claim the lights are spirits of those lost at sea, wandering near Taongi to warn or lure travellers. Others suggest the glow marks submerged reefs, their bioluminescence intensified by tides and currents. Regardless of interpretation, all agree that the atoll exerts an influence that cannot be ignored, commanding respect through both its beauty and its danger. Aerial surveys in the 1,960 seconds attempted to capture the ghostly lights on film. Researchers reported fleeting glimmers, impossible to reproduce under controlled conditions, and sensors often detected nothing. Observers described the lights as shifting in colour and intensity, sometimes forming patterns that resembled paths or figures, as if the atoll were attempting to communicate in a language incomprehensible to humans. These elusive signals lent the island a mystique that bridged science and legend, a space where facts and folklore entwined. Some expeditions have reported that the lights appear to follow patterns tied to lunar cycles, intensifying near full moons and waning during new moons. Certain areas of the atoll seem more active, with glowing spots recurring in similar locations year after year. These observations suggest that the phenomenon may be influenced by natural cycles, yet the precision and repetition have led many to wonder if something beyond human understanding governs the island's spectral displays. Sailors navigating the surrounding waters recount disorienting experiences. Compasses occasionally spin, and fog can appear with startling suddenness, obscuring familiar landmarks. Some describe hearing faint murmurs or the sound of distant footsteps on sand that no one treads. These sensations, whether psychological or supernatural, reinforce Taongi's reputation as a place where reality bends and perception falters, challenging anyone who dares to linger. The atoll's geography amplifies its mystique. Low sandbars encircle shallow lagoons, while jagged coral ridges lurk just beneath the surface. During certain tides, these reefs catch the moonlight in ways that create unnatural reflections, perhaps giving rise to stories of spectral illumination. At low tide, the sand stretches in shifting shapes, and small channels twist unpredictably, making navigation tricky even for those familiar with the region. The land itself seems to guard its secrets with subtle, shifting patterns that confound the unprepared. In the works of artists and writers, Taongi often appears as a liminal space where the boundaries of reality blur. Tales of glowing paths and phantom figures have become motifs in local storytelling, cautioning against intrusion and warning of unseen dangers. Scholars studying these narratives note the consistency of certain details, the timing of the lights, their movement, and their eerie persistence in memory long after the encounter. Modern satellite imagery and oceanographic studies have yet to offer a definitive explanation. While some scientists attribute the phenomena to bioluminescent algae, optical refraction, or rare atmospheric conditions, none fully account for the reports of coordinated movement and intermittent patterns. The island continues to occupy a space between natural curiosity and supernatural speculation, a place where technology has yet to catch up with observation. Approaching Taongi, mariners and researchers remain cautious, their curiosity tempered by the atoll's eerie history. Those who spend time nearby often speak of a quiet tension, a feeling that the atoll is aware of their presence and chooses whether to reveal or conceal its mysteries. The lights, whether natural or spectral, refuse to be pinned down, leaving only questions and half-remembered impressions. Taongi's glow fades with the night, but the memory of its ghostly lights lingers, hinting that some islands are watched by forces unseen. North Brother Island, the island of forgotten souls. A narrow channel separates North Brother Island from the bustling harbour of New York, yet stepping onto its shores feels like entering another world entirely. Rusting fences and abandoned docks mark the periphery, remnants of a place that once served as a quarantine station and hospital for those society preferred to forget. Silence dominates here, broken only by the occasional caw of a gull or the whisper of wind through decaying buildings. Historical records trace the island's use back to the late 19th century, when it housed those afflicted by contagious diseases such as smallpox and tuberculosis. Patients were sent to North Brother not for punishment, but for isolation. Yet the isolation itself carried a weight that few could escape. Official documents list names and dates, but the human stories behind them often disappear into the shadows, leaving only a sense of lives abruptly contained and erased. Photographs from the early 20th century show rows of austere hospital buildings, their walls weathered and windows darkened. Nurses and doctors move through the wards with clinical detachment, yet journals reveal moments of quiet despair, patients longing for contact and connection that never came. Over time, rumours grew of strange occurrences, voices echoing through empty halls, figures glimpsed at windows where no one remained, and the occasional inexplicable shadow crossing a courtyard. The island's geography adds to its aura of abandonment. Surrounded by tidal currents and thick mudflats, North Brother was naturally difficult to access, making it easy for authorities to maintain control and for the forgotten to remain unseen. Paths wind among the remaining hospital structures, leading to overgrown gardens and collapsed sheds, creating a labyrinth that seems designed to confuse and isolate. Even decades after its closure, the layout retains a sense of deliberate separation from the living world. Stories from former workers and occasional visitors hint at more than mere neglect. Some describe hearing soft footsteps along the docks at night, only to find the area empty. Others speak of fleeting glimpses of figures in hospital gowns, vanishing when approached. Whether these experiences are the echoes of trauma or manifestations of collective memory, they reinforce the island's reputation as a place where the past lingers, refusing to be fully released. North Brother also holds secrets of institutional neglect. During its use as a quarantine and later as a drug rehabilitation facility, records were often incomplete or intentionally obscured. Reports describe patients abandoned in their rooms, left without adequate care, and sometimes unrecorded altogether. This history of erasure and concealment has given the island an almost sentient presence, as if it absorbs memory and holds it within the walls and walkways, visible only to those who notice the subtle traces. Exploration by historians and urban adventurers has revealed additional enigmas. Rusted equipment, faded signage, and scattered medical supplies offer silent testimony to the lives once confined there. Odd alignments of buildings and the eerie repetition of corridors create a sense that the architecture itself is an extension of the island's guardianship, preserving stories through silence and shadow. Photographs capture only fragments, never the whole, leaving the imagination to fill the void. Wildlife has reclaimed much of the atoll, adding to the otherworldly quality of the environment. Seabirds nest in abandoned rooms, vines creep across crumbling walls, and the tide sweeps up detritus from the harbour, depositing it along deserted pathways. These natural intrusions contrast sharply with the human-made structures, emphasizing how quickly civilization can be overtaken and hinting that the island will continue to exist on its own terms, unconcerned with memory or neglect. Through generations of storytelling, the island has grown into a silent emblem of those lost to memory. Fishermen and harbour workers tell stories of strange lights at dusk, of fog rolling in that seems thicker around the abandoned buildings, and of distant murmurs that fade as soon as one focuses on them. These tales, whether imagined or observed, have sustained North Brother's reputation as a place suspended between life and absence, a landscape haunted not by spectres alone, but by the weight of history itself. The island's presence is a quiet reminder of what society chooses to remember and what it discards. Time and tide have softened the sharp edges of its history, yet North Brother remains resolute in its isolation, a place where the echoes of forgotten lives persist beneath rust and ivy. Amidst the overgrown paths and empty buildings, North Brother Island stands as a silent guardian of the forgotten. Socotra, the alien island of Earth. The first sight of Socotra from the deck of a vessel is unsettling in its strangeness. Cliffs rise abruptly from turquoise waters, and twisted trees stretch across arid plateaus, their forms so alien that they seem drawn from a dream rather than the natural world. Dragon's blood trees, with their umbrella-like canopies, cast shadows that bend in ways the eye struggles to follow, creating a landscape simultaneously familiar and entirely other. Early sailors spoke of Socotra with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Its isolated position in the Arabian Sea made it a waypoint and a warning, a place rumoured to harbour unusual creatures and plants unknown to science. Chroniclers describe the land as abundant yet forbidding, its harsh cliffs protecting hidden valleys where flora flourished in colours and shapes that defied categorization. Many wondered whether the island had always existed on the edge of the known world, or if it had somehow drifted there, untouched by human hands for millennia. Some voyagers recorded unusual tides near Socotra, currents that shifted unpredictably and carried debris in ways that suggested hidden underwater formations. The island's endemic species contribute to its alien reputation. Birds, reptiles, and insects found nowhere else inhabit Socotra, many of them camouflaged among the stark rock formations or nestled in the twisted branches of trees that drip resin resembling blood. Botanists have marvelled at the density and variety of life adapted to the arid climate, observing plants that seem sculpted by imagination, their forms almost too deliberate, too precise to belong entirely to nature. Human footprints are scarce. Socotra has been inhabited by indigenous communities for centuries, yet much of the island remains untraveled. Narrow paths wind through deserts and wadis, rarely trodden and often ending abruptly at sheer cliffs or hidden caves. Travelers report a sense of being watched by the land itself, as if the island recognizes outsiders and registers their presence. The isolation preserves a feeling of temporal dislocation, where the outside world exists only in memory and the present is governed by the rhythms of the alien terrain. Occasionally, travelers find traces of long-abandoned stone dwellings hidden in wadis, hinting at past inhabitants who left without a trace and whose purpose remains unknown. Caves carved into limestone cliffs hold evidence of ancient human occupation, but they reveal little of their past purpose. Some contain faint carvings and obscure symbols, while others are empty, their entrances marked by unusual weathering patterns that suggest exposure to forces beyond ordinary erosion. Archaeologists have debated whether these sites were ritual spaces, defensive shelters, or remnants of a civilization whose knowledge has been lost to time. The ambiguity adds to Socotra's aura, a place where history and prehistory mingle in shadowed corridors of stone. The climate itself shapes the island's mystique. Monsoon winds sweep across the plains, bending the dragon's blood trees into grotesque silhouettes and churning the surrounding waters into roiling seas. During certain seasons, dust and mist obscure valleys, creating optical illusions where hills appear as mountains and lakes shimmer where none exist. Observers have described mirages that persist for hours, suggesting hidden rivers or oasis-like expanses that dissolve when approached, reinforcing the notion that Socotra resists easy comprehension. Mirages sometimes appear to mimic the shapes of animals or people, leaving observers uncertain whether they glimpse life or illusion. Scientists who have studied the island emphasize its geological peculiarity. Socotra sits at a tectonic juncture, its rocks composed of ancient limestone and volcanic formations, creating soil conditions unlike anywhere else on Earth. Coupled with isolation and extreme weather patterns, these factors have produced flora and fauna that appear as though sculpted by another world. It is a place where the rules of evolution seem stretched, and human expectations struggles to reconcile the forms it encounters. Tales told around hearths and harbour docks have woven additional mystery into the island's story. Villagers speak of strange lights seen at dusk over the island's mountains, of shadows that move without bodies, and of sounds carried by the wind that mimic distant voices. These tales may be metaphorical or natural, yet they persist across generations, suggesting that Socotra's mysteries are as much psychological as they are physical. Visitors often leave with a sense of having witnessed a world parallel to their own, a place preserved in isolation yet suffused with life. Across decades of modern exploration, Socotra continues to radiate an unmistakable sense of otherness. Maps can mark their coordinates, and drones can capture aerial images, yet the island defies complete understanding. Every approach feels tentative, as though the land itself asserts boundaries invisible to instruments or charts. Socotra remains a fragment of the unknown, a land that feels both ancient and alien, guarding secrets that the world has yet to uncover. The Isle of Demons, the Island of Screams. Fog drifts perpetually over the waters surrounding the Isle of Demons, curling around jagged rocks and low cliffs with a persistence that unsettles even seasoned sailors. From afar, the island appears unremarkable, a mere silhouette against grey skies, yet its reputation has haunted the North Atlantic for centuries. Early explorers described an almost tangible sense of dread as they approached, a pressure that seemed to press against both mind and body. Records from 16th century voyages recount the first impressions of the island with chilling consistency. Mariners noted sharp, unyielding cliffs, dense forests, and the constant echo of cries that could not be attributed to wind or waves. Some claimed to see figures moving among the trees, vanishing when approached, leaving only rustling leaves in their wake. The accounts are precise in detail yet vague in explanation, blending observation with terror. Some logs mention the appearance of unidentifiable lights flickering through the forest, moving in patterns that seem to anticipate the sailors' steps. Local fishermen whispered of nights when their nets would tremble without cause, or faint voices would rise from the fog, carrying pleas or laughter that seemed impossibly human. These tales persisted through generations, shaping a cultural understanding that the island was inhabited by forces beyond ordinary perception. Children were warned to respect the waters, and sailors to steer clear after dusk, yet curiosity drew many closer than safety would allow. Explorers who dared land found an environment that resisted intrusion. The terrain is littered with twisted routes and low caves, forming natural traps that confound mapping and navigation. Even brief visits proved exhausting, leaving an uneasy sense that the island itself monitored intruders, revealing paths only to obscure them moments later. Scholars who studied these patterns suggest that natural conditions, fog, tides, and wind combined to produce phenomena that seem deliberate, yet no one can explain the consistency of the experiences. As chronicled in historical accounts, sudden, inexplicable noises often rise from the forests and cliffs. A lone figure might hear distant screams echo across the water, yet when companions look, nothing is visible. Observers often record a mixture of fear and fascination, noting how easily the mind interprets natural sounds as voices, yet some insist that what they heard could not be entirely explained by wind or wildlife. These episodes reinforce the island's reputation as a place where perception bends and reality becomes uncertain. Observers sometimes noted that the cries would shift in tone and direction, as if the island itself was testing their attention and resolve. Attempts to map the island accurately have repeatedly failed. Surveys produce conflicting contours, with cliffs and inlets appearing in one account and absent in the next. Some historians speculate that the dense fog and treacherous coastline create optical illusions, while others suggest that the island itself may shift subtly, an imperceptible motion that confounds human observation. Regardless of cause, the Isle of Demons challenges the authority of charts and the confidence of navigators. Archaeological findings are scarce but unsettling. Fragmented tools and broken pottery hint at a brief human occupation, yet no settlement was sustained. Some researchers interpret these as remnants of survivors from shipwrecks, while others propose ritual use, suggesting that the island may have served as a site for ceremonies tied to sea deities or ancestral spirits. The ambiguity contributes to the eerie resonance of the place, where traces of human activity are present yet defy interpretation. Occasionally, small clusters of bones and artifacts are uncovered, suggesting past tragedies or shipwrecks that the island silently preserves in its soil. Weather patterns amplify the island's sense of menace. Sudden storms arise from otherwise calm seas, the fog thickening into walls of white that obscure cliffs and channels. Waves crash unpredictably against rocks, and lightning occasionally illuminates the forested slopes in stark flashes. Visitors have noted that even brief exposure to the environment leaves a lasting impression, an intuition that the island's moods are as alive as any creature within its bounds. Modern expeditions have attempted to document the island with cameras and sensors, yet few provide clarity. Audio recordings capture intermittent howls or shrieks, but their source cannot be pinpointed. Visual data often reveals shifting light and shadow, forms that appear for moments before dissolving into mist. These modern observations mirror centuries of sailor reports, reinforcing the perception that the island retains a life of its own, resistant to explanation or control. On the remote Isle of Demons, secrets are guarded jealously, and the cries of the past still resonate in the present. Saxenberg Island, the shadow on the horizon. The horizon often betrays Saxenberg Island in the faintest of ways, a shifting silhouette that vanishes when approached. Mariners of the 18th century reported a dark mass emerging from the sea, only to find empty waters upon arrival. Maps marked it with confidence, yet each depiction conflicted with the last, leaving navigators uncertain whether the island existed or if it was an optical trick of wind and light. Accounts from ships' logs describe strange weather surrounding Saxenberg. Sudden mists rise without warning, thick and disorienting, obscuring compasses and throwing the coastline into constant flux. Sailors wrote of waves that seemed to curve around invisible barriers, creating the impression of land where none lay, and of shadows that darted across the water with impossible speed. The island's presence was never fully confirmed, yet it left traces of doubt and unease that lingered long after sightings. Curiosity drove some explorers to investigate, often with disastrous results. Boats found themselves caught in unforeseen currents, separated from companions, and sometimes cast miles from their intended course. Those who survived describe an oppressive sense of being watched, as if the sea itself conspired to protect the island's secret. Every attempt to chart the land produced conflicting coordinates, and the horizon seemed to resist measurement, shifting as if aware of human scrutiny. Eyewitness accounts occasionally offer vivid, almost dreamlike detail. One report tells of jagged cliffs rising above the waves, black against the sky, while another describes rolling hills shrouded in fog, dotted with strange vegetation. Some sailors claim to hear distant footsteps on the shore and faint voices calling across the water, yet no landfall ever confirmed these perceptions. The inconsistency of these observations reinforced the belief that Saxenberg was not merely hidden, but intentionally elusive. When it emerged at the edges of dawn or dusk, several sailors reported that the waves around the island seemed to hum, a low vibration that reverberated through the hull. Others described brief glimpses of unusual bird species circling above, unlike any they had seen elsewhere, disappearing as quickly as the island itself. These phenomena, subtle yet persistent, added to the sense that Saxenberg was not only elusive, but alive in ways impossible to explain. Cartographers of the period struggled to reconcile these reports. Maps often place Saxenberg in varying positions, sometimes hundreds of miles apart, and annotations suggest debates among experts about whether it was real or a repeated error inherited from earlier charts. The persistence of the island in maps, despite contradictory evidence, highlights the tension between exploration and imagination, a tension that Saxenberg seems to exploit effortlessly. Natural phenomena offer partial explanations, yet none fully satisfy. Atmospheric refraction can produce floating illusions and double horizons, while turbulent waters can create patterns that mimic landforms. However, sailors' descriptions of sudden appearances, rapid shifts, and strange movements do not align neatly with known optical or meteorological effects. This discrepancy leaves the island suspended in a space between science and myth, a phantom that confounds reason as much as perception. Legends surrounding Saxenberg extend beyond the logs and maps. Some speak of cursed crews, driven mad after prolonged attempts to reach the island. Others suggest the land harbours lost treasures or remnants of ancient civilizations, glimpsed briefly through fog but disappearing before they can be claimed. These stories contribute to the aura of danger, a mixture of fascination and fear that has endured for centuries. From space, Saxenberg's presence remains a phantom, invisible to the lenses of modern satellites. Where historical accounts suggested solid land, scans show only deep ocean, ripples of current, and occasional shoals that could have inspired illusions. Researchers acknowledge that while many historical sightings may be attributed to misidentification, the sheer number of independent reports over decades raises questions about whether there is more to the legend than mere error. Saxenberg's enduring mystery continues to challenge those who sail the South Atlantic. Its shape and location shift in memory and measurement, leaving witnesses uncertain of what they have seen. Mariners still speak of a dark shadow on the horizon, a fleeting presence that teases the imagination and reminds them that the sea holds secrets beyond human comprehension. At the limits of observation, Saxenberg exists as a shadow that vanishes when approached yet endures in memory. Trindade Island, the UFO island of Brazil. Morning light spreads across the South Atlantic with a soft, trembling glow, illuminating cliffs and ridges while revealing little of the secrets held above Trindade. Observers first noticed glimmers that danced in the sky, moving with an unnatural precision that could not belong to ordinary birds or clouds. The island's isolation magnifies its strangeness, a solitary volcanic outpost where waters rise and fall in unpredictable patterns, and where the horizon itself seems hesitant to reveal the truth. The 1958 Brazilian naval expedition recorded the most striking accounts of unexplained activity. Sailors described luminous discs hovering silently above the cliffs, darting with sudden agility and appearing to defy conventional flight. Photographs taken during these sightings were authenticated but then classified, leaving decades of speculation to flourish. Witnesses remarked that the objects moved deliberately, as though aware of human presence, tracing patterns that unsettled even the most experienced crews. Earlier maritime records suggest that Trindade's anomalies predate modern observation. 19th century fishermen reported glowing spheres emerging from the horizon, retreating when approached yet lingering long enough to inspire unease. Logs occasionally mention a low, vibrating hum through the water, coinciding with the light's arrival. These scattered but consistent records imply that the island has long hosted phenomena that challenge explanation, weaving an enduring thread of mystery through centuries of seafaring. The island's jagged volcanic cliffs create natural vantage points where the sky and sea meet in illusions that challenge perception. Observers noted that the lights frequently aligned with these contours, suggesting an interplay between landscape and phenomenon. Sailors speculated that the island's physical features may amplify or guide the mysterious aerial activity, transforming ordinary geography into a stage for the extraordinary. A peculiar stillness often precedes sightings noticed by those approaching by sea. The wind seems to falter, and even the waves slow, as if the environment itself is holding its breath. Time appears to stretch and compress unpredictably, leaving observers disoriented and uneasy. These subtle cues suggest that Trindade may influence perception itself, bending both the mind and the senses. Equipment deployed to document the lights often fails in inexplicable ways. Cameras capture fleeting flashes, while instruments register brief surges of electromagnetic energy that vanish as quickly as they appear. Engineers reviewing footage noted that the object's movements seemed intentional, almost as if they were observing the human observers in return, an eerie reversal that deepened the island's reputation for elusiveness. Light patterns above the island sometimes traced geometric shapes, briefly etching themselves across the sky before vanishing without explanation. Some interpret these formations as navigational signals, others as messages, though no evidence supports either theory. These fleeting displays add another layer of mystery, hinting that the phenomena may follow rules or intelligence beyond human understanding. Flora and fauna contribute to the island's strange ambience. Dense vegetation obscures rocky paths, casting shadows that sometimes shift in ways that cannot be attributed to wind. Migratory birds circle in unusual formations, occasionally appearing to interact with the lights above, while isolated volcanic outcrops frame the sky as though in concert with the phenomena. The combination of wildlife and unexplained aerial activity creates an environment that feels simultaneously alive and deliberately secretive. Psychological effects on witnesses are consistently reported and difficult to ignore. Sailors describe a compelling urge to follow the lights, even against better judgment. Many report a lingering unease, a sensation that the island monitors their attention and reactions. Hours can feel like minutes, and minutes like hours, leaving memory fragmented yet vivid. The island exerts a quiet pressure on consciousness, as though the act of observation itself is being recorded. On each expedition, landing and conducting in-depth studies of the island have proven challenging. Sudden fogs form without warning, obscuring cliffs and safe landing points. Waves rise unpredictably, smashing against rocks and scattering instruments. Even when conditions permit an approach, the lights vanish before direct observation is possible, leaving only fleeting impressions and a growing sense of wonder mingled with fear. Trindade's mystery persists at the convergence of geography, history, and unexplained aerial phenomena. The island is tangible below, fixed in maps and charts, yet the skies above remain fluid, shifting, and unknowable. Observers across centuries report consistent patterns of elusiveness, a continuity that defies explanation and invites contemplation of forces beyond human understanding. Shrouded in mist and wind, Trindade remains a sentinel whose skies guard secrets beyond comprehension. Maida, the crescent island of forgotten maps, The first mention of Maida appears on maps centuries old, a crescent-shaped land drifting across the Atlantic like a memory half remembered. Sailors passing through the area sometimes glimpsed a green curve against the horizon, only to find it dissolving into mist when approached. Over generations, the island appeared and disappeared in equal measure, leaving cartographers frustrated and mariners wary. Stories of Maida were passed quietly among seafarers. Logs describe a land that shifted subtly, never in the same location twice, as if it existed partly in the imagination of those who sought it. One account tells of a captain who followed the crescent through fog for days, certain of its presence, only to awaken one morning with nothing on the horizon but endless ocean. The ambiguity of its existence became part of the island's legend, as impossible to confirm as it was to dismiss. Cartographers, perplexed by repeated reports, often drew Maida with meticulous care. Coastal lines, harbours, and even small settlements were mapped, lending the island a sense of reality that no sailor ever verified. Scholars suggest that early charts were influenced by tales of Atlantic wanderers, merging observation with myth. These inaccuracies became so entrenched that Maida appeared on maps for centuries, its position adjusted repeatedly, yet never confirmed by exploration. Mariners claimed that approaching the crescent brought a peculiar quality to the air. The wind seemed to shift unnaturally, carrying whispers of unseen movement. Waves would rise and fall in unexpected patterns, giving the impression that the sea itself was guarding the island. Those who attempted landfall reported a disorienting haze that rendered compasses unreliable, as if the ocean and sky conspired to keep Maida hidden from human touch. The waters surrounding the crescent sometimes betray subtle tricks, currents twisting in ways that suggest hidden shores. Sailors observed floating debris and driftwood forming patterns that hinted at land where none existed. These fleeting signs reinforced the idea that Maida was not merely missing but actively elusive, a presence that toyed with perception rather than revealing itself fully. Geographers and historians have long debated the origin of Maida's depiction. Some suggest it is a fragment of pre-Columbian memory, a distorted recollection of real lands glimpsed by early voyagers. Others argue that the island is purely fictional, a phantom born of sailors' superstitions and navigational error. Whatever its origin, the crescent persisted, drifting across charts as if refusing to be pinned down by reason or geography. Sailors' accounts add further intrigue. On rare occasions when the horizon appeared to reveal the crescent shape, reflections of sunlight on the waves produced optical illusions that seemed to animate the shoreline. Shadows moved in unexpected ways, suggesting cliffs, valleys, and dunes that vanished when viewed from a different angle. These phenomena blurred the line between observation and imagination, making it impossible to discern whether Maida existed or was conjured by expectation and desire. The island's absence in modern exploration only deepens its enigma. Satellite imagery reveals nothing where maps once placed their crescent curve, yet historical records maintain a detailed and persistent presence. Some modern theorists suggest that shifting currents, tides, or hidden shoals could have produced temporary visual effects, giving rise to centuries of reported sightings. Yet no natural explanation fully accounts for the consistency of accounts or the persistence of Maida in maritime lore. Psychological impressions play a crucial role in the legend. Mariners speak of a compulsion to follow the crescent when it appeared, a pull that overcame rational caution. Some describe a sense of anticipation, as if the horizon itself beckoned, promising discovery yet delivering frustration. The combination of illusion, expectation, and genuine maritime hazard forged a story of an island that was never truly tangible but always profoundly felt. Maps of Maida continued to circulate well into the 18th century, each version shifting the crescent slightly further west or east, as if the island itself resisted documentation. Scholars of the period noted the persistent fascination of sailors and cartographers alike, recognizing that Maida existed as much in the minds of those who sought it as on any chart. Its movement across maps became a metaphor for the elusiveness of knowledge, a reminder that not all that is drawn can be possessed. Maida lingers in the memory of the Atlantic, a crescent that drifts beyond sight yet persists in imagination, a phantom that reminds the world that some lands are meant to be sought, never found. Vitramanland, the white men's land. Northern seas have always held stories of lands glimpsed beyond the horizon, and among them, Vitramanland occupies a peculiar place. Norse sagas describe pale strangers inhabiting a western shore, a territory known only through fragmented voyages and whispers among explorers. The island never appeared on every map, yet its presence was insistent, etched into oral memory with the precision of repeated encounters. Accounts of early voyages offer tantalizing glimpses of the unknown. Sailors reported seeing settlements of stone and timber, smoke rising from hearths, and figures moving along the shoreline with an unfamiliar gait. These fleeting observations were often interrupted by storms or fog, leaving crews with fragments of experience that could neither be confirmed nor dismissed. The uncertainty gave the land an aura of both danger and fascination, a space at the edge of comprehension. Geographical descriptions remain ambiguous. Some suggest cliffs crowned with sparse trees, others low-lying coasts washed by icy surf. The accounts emphasize the starkness of the terrain, a contrast to familiar northern lands, and the presence of inhabitants whose pale appearance and strange customs distinguished them from the Norse visitors. Scholars speculate that these stories may preserve memory of a pre-Columbian encounter, a relic of contact lost to time. When glimpsed from certain vantage points, occasional sightings reveal peculiar structures along the coast, walls of pale stone catching the light at strange angles. Sailors claimed these formations resembled towers and enclosures, though storms and fog would often obscure them before detailed observation was possible. The descriptions hint at an organized settlement, suggesting that Vitramanland was more than a fleeting vision and may have been inhabited in some form. Explorers' logs hint at a world that existed partially in imagination. Captains recorded glimpses of towers and dwellings, then found only waves and wind in their place. Some sailors insisted that Vitramanland shifted with tides and fog, appearing for hours and then vanishing, as if carried away by the currents themselves. The island's elusive nature blurred the line between reality and vision, reinforcing its legendary status. Weather patterns around the supposed island added to its elusiveness. Sudden fog banks, shifting winds, and unseasonal storms frequently prevented prolonged observation, leaving crews with partial impressions that could never be verified. Some mariners speculated that the atmosphere itself might act as a veil, as if nature conspired to protect the land from complete discovery, reinforcing the aura of the impossible. Along the shores and cliffs, mariners recorded peculiar activity in the local wildlife. Seabirds circled in erratic formations near the supposed coast, and whales sometimes lingered where no land should have been. These anomalies contributed to the impression that the environment itself was attuned to the presence of humans, or perhaps aware of their desire to confirm what could not be fully grasped. Nature seemed complicit in both revealing and concealing the island. The psychological imprint of Vitramanland is striking. Sailors described a pull toward the horizon, an irresistible urge to follow glimpses of cliffs or settlements despite knowledge of the dangers ahead. Fog and storm could conceal the land for days, yet memory retained its shape, leaving an uneasy certainty that something tangible existed just out of reach. This interplay of longing and frustration has become a hallmark of the island's lore. Cartographic attempts illustrate human persistence and error. Maps show Vitramanland in varying locations, sometimes near Greenland, sometimes farther south, as if the island itself resisted fixation. These inconsistencies were compounded by repeated reports from independent voyages, each claiming observation while providing contradictory coordinates. The result was a land both recorded and unrecorded, simultaneously present and absent. The more historians argue, the more the mystery seems to deepen rather than diminish. Some researchers propose that Vitramanland preserves echoes of Norse encounters with distant Atlantic territories, others that it is a symbolic place, representing fear and hope at the edge of the known world. Archaeological evidence is non-existent, leaving the saga as the primary testament to its possible reality. The absence of physical confirmation intensifies the fascination, for the island's elusiveness is integral to its identity. Over centuries, The retelling of its tales has ensured that the island's enigmatic reputation remains intact. Sailors tell of cliffs that appear white in the sun, of shadows that suggest towers and fortifications, and of figures glimpsed at the water's edge before disappearing. These repeated accounts across centuries suggest that Vitramanland occupies a space beyond simple geography, residing instead in the intersection of perception, memory, and desire. Across the North Atlantic, Vitramanland lingers not as a destination, but as a beckoning horizon, a pale land visible only to those who believe in it. Emerald Island, the mirage beneath the clouds. Mist clings to the horizon like a secret, shaping hills and valleys that vanish the moment the eye tries to fix them. Mariners who first glimpsed the island described it as a ribbon of green, a land that existed more in fleeting sensation than in cartography. Its presence confounded even the most seasoned sailors, a mirage that seemed tangible but could never be held. Some early logs describe patterns of coral and rock that appear to extend inland, suggesting features that are visible only under certain angles of sunlight, a phenomenon that has never been fully explained. Old narratives insist that stepping onto the island brings one into a strange temporal current. Observers claim hours could pass in what felt like moments, while brief glimpses stretched endlessly in memory. The phenomenon was rarely documented in logs with precision, yet every account hints at a shared experience. The island toyed with perception, leaving certainty just out of reach. Several sailors also noted a faint, unusual luminescence along the water at dusk, as if the sea itself traced the outline of the island. One historian, piecing together centuries of sightings, noted that Emerald Island occupies a peculiar place in maritime imagination. References appear across oceans and eras, each observer convinced of its reality, yet never able to reconcile location with charted maps. In this way, the island became both a point on a map and a symbol of the unknowable, a land that exists only where attention and desire intersect. Archival documents hint that some sightings coincided with unusual bird migrations, suggesting the island may influence wildlife patterns, or perhaps observers link the birds to the mirage retroactively. Cliffs rise and fall in optical illusion, their contours shifting with each viewing angle. Light refracts off the water in ways that suggest depth and distance that may not exist. Birds circle in erratic patterns, creating shadows that resemble forests or ridges. Observers occasionally reported reflections resembling inlets or streams that appeared only in certain weather conditions, reinforcing the sense that Emerald Island manifests selectively, responding to light and atmosphere. Weather plays a decisive role in the island's elusiveness. Sudden mists gather without warning, folding hills into clouds and scattering the horizon. The sun's position can render entire ridges invisible, while low light casts reflections that resemble shorelines. Some claim that storms seem to gather and dissipate unusually fast around the island, as though the atmosphere itself was attuned to the mirage. Psychological impressions leave a lasting mark. The pursuit of Emerald Island inspires a tension that is both compelling and unsettling. Sailors and explorers describe an urge to follow the faint green shimmer, a drive that overrides caution. Some logbooks mention shared experiences among crews, where multiple people report seeing the same improbable features simultaneously, hinting at a collective phenomenon rather than individual illusion. From medieval charts to modern surveys, cartographers have long wrestled with the island's elusive form. Shapes shifted between maps, sometimes stretched into crescents, sometimes flattened into low plains. Each rendition borrowed from previous charts while accommodating new sightings, resulting in a tapestry of contradictions. Several editions of early charts include annotations noting "disappears under certain clouds," an acknowledgement that observers were aware of the island's capricious nature. Marine life adds layers to the enigma. Dolphins leap near imagined shores, birds hover in seemingly deliberate formations, and schools of fish scatter as if responding to some unseen boundary. Reports mention that bioluminescent plankton sometimes gather along the mirage, creating an ethereal glow that could explain part of the island's apparent form at night. Even modern attempts at validation yield paradoxes. Satellites reveal nothing substantial, yet subtle anomalies in currents and light refraction mimic the shapes described for centuries. The island resists documentation, existing in a space between observation and interpretation. A few contemporary navigators noted compass deviations near the location, though no consistent pattern emerged, adding a layer of technological mystery to the phenomenon. Between the faded charts and the recollections of travelers, stories differ, yet both hint at the same truth. Emerald Island is not meant to be captured, only glimpsed. Those who have tried to linger find that the land recedes, leaving behind fragments of image and feeling. It is a place that challenges the boundary between reality and perception, forcing observers to confront the limits of knowing. Emerald Island drifts beneath the clouds, never fully present, a mirage that promises land but delivers only the quiet insistence of the impossible. Bus Island, the lost discovery of Martin Frobisher. Martin Frobisher's logs record a fleeting glimpse of land that would haunt explorers for centuries. He described cliffs rising from the sea and a stretch of terrain that appeared solid under shifting light. The fleet made careful note of its location, yet none of Frobisher's records offer precise coordinates, leaving later navigators to reconcile expectation with reality. The report sparked immediate curiosity in England, where cartographers and geographers sought to translate these observations into tangible maps. Bus Island appeared consistently on charts throughout the late 16th century, its form traced and retraced by mapmakers who relied on earlier depictions. Rivers and inlets were drawn, sometimes exaggerated, reflecting both imagination and the desire for accuracy. Scholars would later note the paradox: the more faithfully the island was copied, the more impossible it became to locate. Maps became a record of belief rather than verified geography, a testament to the influence of authority in shaping the known world. Observers' accounts conflicted sharply. One navigator mentioned cliffs and frozen slopes. Another recalled rolling hills with small beaches suitable for landing. Some reports suggested vegetation, others described barren rock. Some logs mention unusual wildlife near the supposed coast, including migratory birds that seemed drawn toward the phantom land. Weather patterns in the region often shifted abruptly, making it difficult for crews to distinguish the horizon from land. Faint notes on old maps warn that the island might be imagined, a reflection of the skepticism of the era. These inconsistencies fueled debate among explorers, compelling some to seek explanations in optical phenomena or the presence of icebergs that could appear land-like from a distance. The island occupied a space that seemed simultaneously real and illusory. Efforts to locate Bus Island led to repeated disappointment. Subsequent voyages following Frobisher's path encountered only open water, fog banks, and treacherous currents. Mariners recorded brief glimpses of shapes on the horizon that dissolved upon approach, leading to frustration and speculation. Some theorized that seasonal light or atmospheric conditions produced mirages, yet no pattern could reliably reproduce the island. These failures reinforced its enigmatic reputation and solidified its place in the lore of Atlantic exploration. The presence of Bus Island on maps carried weight beyond curiosity. Territories and fishing rights depended on the recognition of land, making the island politically significant. English officials debated whether claims should be asserted based on Frobisher's reports, though practical attempts to take possession were impossible. The phantom land highlighted the gap between legal documentation and physical reality, a gap that would frustrate both navigators and rulers alike. Descriptions of the island often reference geological features that were later impossible to verify. Cliffs of grey stone, gentle inclines, and inlets were all noted, yet subsequent expeditions failed to find any consistent formations. Contemporary researchers suggest that optical illusions, shifting ice, and variations in atmospheric refraction could explain the observations. Even so, the exact combination that led Frobisher and his crew to report land remains unconfirmed, leaving Bus Island suspended between documented history and uncertainty. Historical analysis emphasizes the endurance of Bus Island in collective memory. Its repeated appearances on maps influenced generations of explorers, shaping expectations and motivating voyages that yielded no concrete results. The story of the island underscores the influence of observation filtered through imagination and the challenges faced when human perception encounters an unforgiving and dynamic environment. Bus Island became a symbol of exploration's limits, a place that could exist more in charts than in the ocean itself. Scientific inquiry has provided insight but not closure. Modern techniques, including satellite imaging and navigational simulations, reveal no permanent land at Frobisher's reported location. Subtle anomalies in currents and reflections might explain why land seemed visible under certain conditions, yet the island retains its mystique. The combination of historical report, cartographic persistence, and failed verification has ensured that Bus Island is remembered as a phantom shaped by both observation and hope. The story endures as a reflection on the Atlantic's mysteries. Maps retain their shape, journals record their fleeting appearances, and the legacy of exploration preserves its enigma. Bus Island reminds navigators and scholars alike that some lands exist only where belief and perception intersect, and that discovery is not always measured by physical presence. Appearing on maps and in historical accounts, Bus Island hovers between reality and imagination, a place claimed as much by hope as by sight. Rupes Nigra, the magnetic island at the top of the world. Navigators in the early 16th century reported a singular anomaly at the North Pole, compasses spinning uncontrollably and ships drawn toward an unseen mass. This phenomenon became associated with Rupes Nigra, a colossal black rock said to rise from the Arctic waters, attracting curiosity and fear in equal measure. Accounts describe a sheer cliff of obsidian-like stone, its surface unbroken, reflecting light in strange ways that made measuring distance nearly impossible. Scholars and mariners alike speculated on its size, some imagining a plateau vast enough to host entire settlements, though no one ever approached close enough to confirm. Illustrated at the heart of early maps, Rupes Nigra dominates, encircled by vast oceans, an inventive answer to the perplexing motion of compasses. Geographers debated whether the island truly existed or served as a convenient anchor for understanding the world's magnetic mysteries. The depiction appeared in numerous atlases, often illustrated with exaggerated detail, a black square rising from icy waters, encircled by mountainous formations. Its presence influenced navigation, lending both authority and confusion to charts of the far north. Reports described a singular and unnatural stillness around the island. Sailors claimed that winds shifted erratically, currents stalled or reversed, and ice flows gathered in unusual patterns. These conditions created the illusion of land, yet no explorer managed a direct sighting. Some logs note that ships seemed to slow, as if drawn toward a magnetic center, prompting speculation that the rock itself exerted an unseen force. These observations contributed to a growing legend that Rupes Nigra was both real and fundamentally unknowable. The island's reputation is intertwined with imagination and early science. Astronomers, cartographers, and explorers speculated on its material, often describing it as magnetic, obsidian, or even iron-rich. Some theorized it acted as the axis of the Earth's magnetism, explaining compass deviations across the northern hemisphere. Others suggested that the Black Cliffs were metaphorical, a symbolic representation of the unknown polar regions rather than a tangible landmass. The debate blurred the line between observation and conjecture, making Rupes Nigra a focal point for both scientific inquiry and myth. Among the few who claimed to see it, reports were inconsistent and conflicting. A few whalers and traders claimed to glimpse dark cliffs through fog or mirage, only for them to vanish when approached. Explorers described optical illusions, reflections off ice, and distortions caused by low-angle sunlight, all combining to produce visions of a solid landmass. These fleeting sightings cemented the island in collective imagination, even when no expedition returned with confirmation. The Arctic itself seemed to resist precise measurement, reinforcing the sense that some features were best recorded in maps and stories rather than in reality. Several influential atlases perpetuated Rupes Nigra's existence into the 18th century. Cartographers referenced earlier voyages, copying details even as more navigational data became available. Its black square remained a constant, sometimes labelled as magnetic, sometimes annotated with warnings of treacherous currents. For centuries, sailors relied on its supposed presence to explain compass anomalies, despite never encountering the rock firsthand. In this way, Rupes Nigra became a bridge between myth and practical navigation, a landmark both feared and consulted without confirmation. The allure of Rupes Nigra also inspired speculation about the wider Arctic. Some accounts suggested it was surrounded by a ring of icebound islands, forming a hidden continent. Maps portrayed frozen rivers, inaccessible passes, and high cliffs, all reinforcing the idea of an unreachable land at the top of the world. Explorers who ventured into the polar seas often returned with contradictory reports, leaving a mixture of awe and uncertainty that only added to the island's mystique. Modern scientific understanding has dismissed the physical existence of Rupes Nigra, attributing compass anomalies to the Earth's magnetic field and the polar environment's optical distortions. Yet historical references preserve the mystery, revealing the ingenuity and imagination of early cartographers trying to explain the uncharted north. Rupes Nigra remains a symbol of human curiosity confronted by nature's extremes, a reminder that some concepts persist in maps long after empirical verification fails. Legends endure, and the Black Rock lives in stories as much as on paper. Its magnetic pull continues in imagination, guiding both scholars and dreamers toward the polar unknown. Rupes Nigra is a monument to the intersection of observation, conjecture, and myth, a place that embodies the fascination with the edge of the world. Even in the most detailed maps and the oldest memories, Rupes Nigra towers, a magnetic phantom at the top of the world, an island that may have existed, a force that may have only been imagined. Sarah Ann Island, the colony that never was. Charts from the mid-19th century marked a phantom land called Sarah Ann Island, claimed by guano miners and noted in American records. Its coordinates appeared alongside other islands, treated as a legitimate target for commerce and resource extraction. Ships were dispatched to verify its existence, guided by government documents and the promise of valuable deposits. Yet when these expeditions arrived, the ocean revealed only open water, waves rippling where solid ground was expected. Merchants and prospectors who sought Sarah Ann Island encountered confusion almost immediately. Observations differed between captains. Some reported distant dark shapes on the horizon, while others saw nothing at all. Fog and haze distorted vision, creating the illusion of land that vanished as ships drew near. Despite the lack of physical evidence, belief in the island persisted, reinforced by maps, charts, and official records. Economic ambitions and the allure of guano deposits fueled speculation about the island. Investors, officials, and sailors clung to every reported sighting, documenting potential features and hazards as if the land were real. The prospect of new resources lent credence to fleeting impressions, and the possibility of wealth amplified even minor or ambiguous reports into something worthy of notice. Crew logs detailed fleeting impressions of beaches, cliffs, and rocks that seemed to appear and vanish with the shifting light. Some entries describe sandy stretches lined with low cliffs. Others note jagged rocks breaking the waves at unexpected points. The contradictions in these observations only heightened the island's mystery, suggesting a place that existed at the edge of perception rather than reality. Expeditions tracing the given coordinates consistently returned to open sea. Surveying instruments registered nothing, while attempts to land proved impossible. Some crews speculated that unusual currents, floating debris, or optical illusions created the impression of solid ground. Over time, the repeated failures of these voyages did little to erase Sarah Ann Island from charts, leaving a phantom in the record that defied direct confirmation. The quest for Sarah Ann Island also reflects the high stakes of the guano trade during the 19th century. Guano was prized as fertilizer, and a new deposit could mean significant wealth for investors and nations alike. Expeditions often combined exploration with commercial scouting, and the mere possibility of landing on a previously unclaimed island spurred detailed observations and meticulous note-taking. In this way, the pursuit of resources magnified every fleeting sighting, ensuring that even the faintest suggestion of land received serious attention. The persistence of Sarah Ann Island in official records underscores how human perception can solidify into accepted reality. Copying errors, reliance on prior documentation, and the authority of government surveys all contributed to the island's enduring presence. Even as new maps began to question its existence, the myth remained embedded in nautical lore, demonstrating how belief can persist in the absence of proof. Modern technology confirms that no land rises at the supposed location, offering explanations for prior illusions. Satellites reveal open ocean where captains once noted shores, and oceanographic studies attribute previous sightings to mirages, haze, and floating pumice. Yet the human element, the combination of hope, expectation, and ambition, was equally powerful in sustaining the story of Sarah Ann Island across decades of maritime endeavour. Comparisons with other phantom islands in the Pacific highlight a recurring pattern: hope and misperception transforming observation into accepted geography. Many unverified islands emerged in similar ways, appearing on charts, attracting expeditions, and then vanishing from direct observation. These cases illustrate the tension between human expectation and the unyielding sea, where perception often outweighs empirical confirmation. Over the decades, Sarah Ann Island became a cautionary example for cartographers and sailors alike. Some maps continued to mark it long after it failed to appear to any crew, serving as a reminder that unverified claims could propagate through generations of charts. Maritime journals occasionally reference the island as a warning, noting how hope and expectation might transform optical illusions or floating debris into something more concrete. Its presence in the collective imagination persisted, influencing navigation, literature, and the subtle ways humans interpret the unknown in the vastness of the ocean. Its legacy demonstrates the conflict between documented claims and observable reality. Governments recorded it, merchants pursued it, and sailors sought it, yet the physical world refused confirmation. Sarah Ann Island became a ghost, not of folklore, but of bureaucracy and ambition, a name anchored in maps yet absent from the ocean itself. Its story endures in historical accounts and cartographic archives, reminding us of the fragile boundary between belief and fact. Seen on maps yet never in reality, Sarah Ann Island remains a ghost, a colony that never existed, and a reminder that some places are claimed more by expectation than by reality. Antillia, the island of the seven cities. In medieval Iberia, whispers of a western refuge spread through ports and monasteries, carried by sailors and pilgrims returning from distant shores. This land, known as Antillia, was said to harbour 7 cities founded by fleeing bishops and noble families, escaping the turmoil of the Muslim conquests. Maps of the Atlantic began to depict a crescent-shaped island, its coasts lined with settlements, churches and towers, as if the European imagination had taken physical form. Reports from mariners described a serene island beyond the horizon, where the sun seemed to linger longer over green plains and whitewashed towns. Travellers claimed that the seas surrounding Antillia were unusually calm, as if protecting the island from intrusion. Each sighting was fleeting. Clouds, fog, and distance conspired to render the land indistinct, yet the conviction of its existence endured. Monks chronicling voyages often mentioned visions of Antillia, sometimes as literal instruction and other times as spiritual guidance. Some suggested that the island was a haven for the righteous, blessed by divine providence. Others hinted at cautionary undertones, warning that only the pure of heart could hope to find it, and that greed or impatience would lead ships astray. These accounts blurred the line between geography and faith, weaving the island into both material and spiritual imagination. The first printed maps to include Antillia gave it a precise location far west of Portugal, surrounded by smaller islets that were said to be the remnants of other lost lands. Cartographers copied these depictions with near-religious devotion, ensuring the island persisted in nautical knowledge even as explorers failed to locate it. Over time, Antillia became a standard reference in Atlantic navigation, a ghostly point on charts whose reality was never verified. Scribes and mapmakers across Europe debated the shape and size of Antillia, often embellishing it with fantastical features. Some maps depicted rivers, mountains, and forests that no sailor had ever seen, turning the island into a fully imagined landscape. The repeated inclusion of these details gave Antillia an authority of its own, making it difficult for skeptics to entirely dismiss its existence. Some expeditions attempted to reach Antillia, inspired by curiosity, devotion, or the hope of treasure. Sailors reported strange currents and shifting weather as they neared the supposed coordinates, phenomena that made the approach nearly impossible. Horizons would reveal shadows of land that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. The sea seemed to conspire with the clouds, ensuring that the island remained tantalizingly out of reach. Legends suggest that the 7 cities were each unique in character, reflecting different aspects of Iberian culture and society. They were described as walled settlements, with churches and plazas connected by winding roads. Some chroniclers added details of rich harvests, thriving markets, and architecture that echoed Spanish and Portuguese traditions, lending plausibility to the stories despite the absence of physical evidence. Antillia's endurance in maps and stories illustrates the human desire to locate safe havens in uncertain times. The Iberian Peninsula had faced centuries of conflict and upheaval, and the idea of a distant refuge resonated strongly. Sailors and scholars alike relied on both imagination and experience to navigate these unknown waters, blending observation, hope, and inherited lore. Occasionally, shadowy sightings at sea reinforced belief in the island. Dark shapes on the horizon, shifting mist, and distant lights were interpreted as confirmation of its existence. Each report was eagerly recorded, shared, and added to navigational charts. Over time, the combination of expectation and optical phenomena entrenched Antillia in the collective imagination, giving it life far beyond the reach of any explorer. The story of Antillia also influenced later Atlantic exploration. Columbus and his contemporaries were aware of these legends, and they shaped early notions of lands across the ocean. Whether inspiring ambition, caution, or superstition, the idea of the island persisted, merging with evolving maps and the dreams of those who sailed toward the unknown. Writers and chroniclers carried the legend of Antillia into stories, poems, and travel accounts, ensuring it survived even as explorers failed to find it. Some claimed that the island served as inspiration for voyages into the wider Atlantic, a symbol of hope and discovery that shaped the ambitions of seafarers for generations. In this way, Antillia existed not only on charts, but in the collective imagination of Europe, a testament to the power of legend in guiding human endeavour. From sailors' accounts to cartographic speculation, Antillia endures as a phantom refuge, a constellation of 7 cities that may have existed only in hope and fear, a land glimpsed by imagination and lost to the Atlantic forever. Taongi Island, the icebound illusion. The Southern Ocean has always tested the limits of human perception, its endless horizon and treacherous icebergs lending themselves to both wonder and deception. In 1841, a whaler's crew reported land rising from the mist, a cold silhouette of cliffs and ice that seemed impossible yet compelling. They named it Taongi Island, charted its position, and returned with logs that would haunt maps for decades. Each detail was meticulously recorded: the jagged edges of the shore, the pattern of snow against rock, and the peculiar stillness that seemed to hang over the land. Crew members spoke of an island that appeared solid, yet seemed to dissolve upon approach. Mist and fog obscured shapes, creating illusions of inlets and coves where none existed. Some believed that shifting ice floes played tricks on the eye, reflecting the dim polar sun in ways that mimicked land. Others insisted the island was real, insisting that the charts held a fragment of truth long hidden from explorers who failed to reach it. The reports of Taongi Island spread quickly through maritime circles. Captains consulting charts noted the island with caution, wondering if it was a reliable reference or a phantom born of Arctic conditions. Subsequent expeditions sought it out, tracing the coordinates through ice-laden waters and unyielding winds. yet each voyage confirmed the same unsettling pattern. The island appeared in memory and logbook, but not in reality. Whalers and explorers described the experience with a mixture of fascination and frustration. Some claimed glimpses of jagged cliffs just beyond fog banks, while others reported seeing nothing but open water. Optical illusions created by shifting light and the interplay of ice and cloud made each sighting fleeting, leaving crews uncertain whether they had seen land or merely the tricks of a frozen sea. The uncertainty gave the island a spectral presence, a place that existed only at the threshold between perception and confirmation. Maps continued to depict Taongi Island for decades, a ghostly mark in the far reaches of the southern oceans. Cartographers copied the original whalers' sketches, and successive editions reinforced their presence. Scholars later noted that the island's persistence reflected both human error and hope, a desire to chart every rock and shore, and an unwillingness to abandon the notion of a hidden land. In this way, Taongi Island straddled the line between reality and myth, a testament to the power of suggestion on even the most disciplined navigators. The physical conditions of the region contributed to the illusion. Icebergs, snowfields, and shifting weather could produce shadows and shapes that resembled a coastline. Atmospheric refraction, particularly under polar light, distorted distances and outlines, making distant ice appear as cliffs and promontories. These natural phenomena created the conditions for a lasting legend, one that relied on the unforgiving interplay between environment and human interpretation. In the pages of maritime journals, accounts of the island persisted despite repeated, unsuccessful searches. Each expedition seemed to add new details: faint coves, elevated ridges, and unusual ice formations that might have been mistaken for vegetation or cliffs. Observers were often convinced they were seeing the same land described by the original whalers, yet no subsequent verification ever confirmed their observations. The island's spectral quality persisted, shaping expectations and memory in equal measure. Taongi Island became an emblem of the challenges inherent in exploring polar seas. Sailors learned that the ocean could produce convincing illusions, and that maps were only as reliable as the perceptions of those who created them. The island also served as a cautionary tale, reminding explorers that even meticulous observation could be deceived by natural forces beyond comprehension. Subsequent explorers and oceanographers studied the accounts of Taongi Island to understand how illusions could persist in extreme environments. They noted that polar currents, floating ice, and the shifting angle of sunlight created optical effects that fooled even experienced eyes. Scientific analysis of these reports later informed navigation techniques, ensuring that future expeditions could distinguish between fleeting icebound shapes and actual land, transforming a legend into a lesson in maritime perception. Through fog, ice, and whispered stories, Taongi Island's legend joined the wider lore of phantom polar territories. Like other icebound illusions, it reflected the interplay between hope, imagination, and the extreme conditions of the Southern Ocean. The island's fleeting appearances on the horizon and enduring presence on charts captured the tension between what is seen and what is real, between expectation and the immutable reality of the sea. No sailor ever set foot upon it, yet Taongi Island remains a shadow in the cold waters, an icebound illusion that reminds all who seek it that not every sight is land, and not every map can be trusted. Kerguelen's Phantom Isles, the cartographer's mistake that endured. In the frigid expanse of the southern oceans, 18th century French explorers charted lands that may never have existed. Among these was the Kerguelen region, a cluster of supposed islands reported by sailors navigating treacherous seas. Early maps depicted a scattering of rocky outcrops and jagged shores, seemingly confirmed by multiple voyages, yet no expedition could fully reconcile observation with reality. These isles, now termed Kerguelen's Phantom Isles, lingered on charts for decades, a testament to the persistence of error and imagination. Reports from sailors described land appearing at the edge of fog or between storm clouds, only to vanish as ships approached. crews spoke of distant cliffs that melted into open water and small coves that disappeared beneath the waves. Some mariners speculated that floating ice or optical distortions played tricks on their eyes, yet these explanations failed to account for the repeated sightings logged across years. Each observation seemed to reinforce the notion of islands that were both present and impossible to reach. Maps from the period solidified the presence of these phantom islands. Cartographers relied heavily on previous charts, copying coordinates and sketches with meticulous care. Even when some explorers doubted the existence of certain landmasses, the authority of earlier maps lent them credibility. Over time, the supposed isles became fixtures of geography, their names and shapes propagated through generations of navigation, making the mistake enduring rather than fleeting. Expeditions launched with the intent of verification often returned with frustration rather than confirmation. Ice, fog, and sudden storms obscured vision, and the vast Southern Ocean offered few landmarks for orientation. Some logs describe the thrill of spotting jagged ridges or inlets, only to find open water where land should have stood. These repeated encounters with illusion reinforced the region's reputation as a place where human perception faltered under extreme conditions. Scientific reflection later suggested that the illusions were products of optical and environmental phenomena. Mirages, shifting icebergs, and low clouds could create convincing impressions of cliffs and shores. Observers were also prone to expectation bias, interpreting ambiguous forms as the islands noted in earlier reports. In combination, these factors explain how multiple voyages could confirm islands that were never truly there. The persistence of Kerguelen's phantom isles influenced not only navigation, but also the culture of exploration. Sailors treated them with a mix of respect and caution, wary of reporting too little or risking ridicule by dismissing an island that others had claimed to see. The legend of these phantom isles became part of the lore of Southern Ocean voyages, a cautionary tale about the limits of observation in remote and unforgiving waters. Cartographic errors were compounded by communication delays and copying mistakes. Coordinates were rounded or misrecorded, sketches distorted by lack of scale, and descriptive notes misinterpreted by later mapmakers. Each iteration of the maps reinforced the illusion, embedding the islands into accepted knowledge despite the absence of tangible proof. In this way, Kerguelen's phantom isles exemplify how small errors, repeated over time, can achieve a permanence of their own. Literature and navigation manuals occasionally reference these islands as both a mystery and a warning. Authors emphasize the difficulty of polar exploration and the hazards of trusting charts without first-hand verification. These accounts contributed to the enduring fascination with phantom islands, blending empirical observation with human imagination. Over time, the Kerguelen region became a case study in the persistence of myth within the framework of science. Even as later expeditions and modern surveys revealed no trace of the supposed isles, the story of Kerguelen's phantom isles remained embedded in historical maps and nautical records. The islands, though non-existent, served as reminders of how easily error and expectation could shape the human understanding of the natural world. They occupy a space between myth and geography, a reflection of the challenges inherent in exploring unknown seas. Though never real, Kerguelen's phantom isles endure as a testament to the enduring power of error, a cluster of lands that existed more in belief than in reality, haunting charts and imaginations alike. Street Brendan's Island, the monk's vision. In the early 6th century, Irish monks set sail across the Atlantic in search of the promised land, guided by faith and visions. Among them, Street Brendan became the most famous chronicled in accounts that describe a voyage both spiritual and geographical. His journey, undertaken in a small leather-hulled boat called a curragh, was said to span countless days and nights, passing islands and seas that seemed to exist between heaven and earth. One destination, Street Brendan's Island, emerged repeatedly in these narratives, a land of green plains, fertile soil, and divine promise. Descriptions of the island blend natural observation with allegorical imagery. The shores were lined with white sands, rivers ran clear and swift, and hills rose gently above fields dotted with flowers. Inhabitants were rarely mentioned, leaving the impression of a world unspoiled and solitary, a place apart from human conflict. Mariners who later attempted to reconcile these accounts with real geography often struggled to distinguish literal description from spiritual metaphor, as the visions seemed to operate on a plane beyond ordinary perception. Stories of the voyage were widely circulated in monasteries and courts, copied and recopied in manuscripts that spread across Europe. Each retelling varied slightly, some emphasizing the island's bounty, others focusing on trials at sea or miraculous encounters. The result was a layered narrative, part travelogue, part moral lesson, and part inspiration for generations of explorers seeking lands unseen. In this way, Brendan's Island existed simultaneously as a geographic concept and a symbol of divine providence. Sailors who attempted to locate the island in later centuries reported strange phenomena. Low clouds sometimes appeared to form shapes resembling hills and valleys, and reflections on the ocean's surface created illusions of white beaches. On rare occasions, distant rocks or shoals were mistaken for the fabled island, fueling hope among crews and chartmakers. These experiences reinforced the mystique, ensuring that the island persisted in navigational charts and maritime lore long after Brendan's time. Medieval maps often included Brendan's Island in the North Atlantic, marked as a large, crescent-shaped land. Cartographers sometimes noted its uncertain location, signaling both the allure and the ambiguity of the sighting. The island's repeated inclusion illustrates the tension between recorded observation and myth, demonstrating how imagination could shape the contours of the known world. Scholars today recognize these maps as a fascinating fusion of exploration, belief, and interpretive error. Some versions of the Brendan legend describe the island as a resting place for monks, a place where time flowed differently and sustenance was abundant. Others depict it as a waypoint between perilous seas and safer harbours, an interlude of calm amid storms and monstrous waves. These stories served both practical and spiritual purposes. They guided seafarers while reinforcing moral and religious lessons about faith, perseverance, and divine guidance. The enduring fascination with Brendan's Island influenced exploration during the Age of Discovery. Mariners such as the Portuguese and Spanish referenced the legend when venturing into the Atlantic, hoping to locate lands previously glimpsed only through vision or rumour. Some believed that discovering the island would fulfill the promises of the manuscripts, a tangible realization of centuries of anticipation and devotion. Others approached with skepticism, understanding that the island might exist only in story and collective imagination. On countless journeys, mariners found that the legend of Brendan's Island influenced their Atlantic crossings, even when the island eluded them. Navigational strategies evolved to account for illusions, fog banks, and distant shoals that could be mistaken for land. Observers kept meticulous logs of currents and celestial markers, ensuring that the pursuit of the island contributed to practical knowledge even when the destination remained imaginary. Passed down in oral tradition and written accounts alike, legends often describe unusual phenomena surrounding the island. Floating islands of seaweed, towering waves, and mirages gave the impression of land where none truly existed. Observers could be led astray by light reflecting off clouds and water, interpreting ordinary oceanic features as elements of Brendan's vision. These illusions persisted, entwining perception, expectation, and desire in ways that made the island a permanent fixture of maritime consciousness. Even in modern times, Brendan's Island captivates scholars and enthusiasts alike. Oceanographers, historians, and mythologists study the voyage accounts to understand the interplay between exploration, imagination, and faith. The legend exemplifies how a single narrative can endure across centuries, influencing the perception of the world and inspiring journeys into both known and unknown realms. At the boundary between belief and reality, Brendan's Island lingers, a vision of green fields and silent waters that has guided the faithful and fascinated the curious for over a millennium. Estotiland, the forgotten land of the north. On the edges of 16th century charts lies a land wedged between Greenland and Labrador, a place that never fully existed yet, entirely disappeared from the imagination of sailors and cartographers. Estotiland appears and vanishes across charts, sketched in varying shapes and sizes, sometimes a narrow strip of coast, other times a sprawling territory of forests and rivers. These fleeting depictions suggest more than error. They whisper of memory, rumour, and voyages long before Columbus set sail for the New World. The origin of its name is uncertain, yet it lingers in the records of explorers who sailed icy waters in pursuit of lands unseen. Norse sagas speak of voyages beyond known settlements, of expeditions that traced the eastern coast of Greenland and ventured westward into the unknown. Some historians speculate that Estotiland grew from fragments of these tales, magnified by the accounts of sailors who returned with hints of fertile lands and abundant game, only to be lost in the vast, fog-shrouded expanse of the North Atlantic. One report describes a Norse ship caught in storms near an unseen coast, the crew certain they glimpsed forests and rivers. Yet when they returned with the news, the land had disappeared from even the most detailed maps. European mapmakers of the 16th century often included Estotiland with caution, annotating it as a land of uncertainty or marking its position with dotted lines. The persistence of the island on charts, despite repeated failures to locate it, has puzzled scholars. Observers from Portugal, England, and France all recorded similar positions, with rivers, mountains, and settlements that never materialized for those who sought them. Merchant ships of the period occasionally reported sightings. One account from 1553 tells of a Portuguese crew navigating the frigid waters west of Greenland, who observed a landmass rising through the mist, cloaked in forests and stretching beyond the horizon. They attempted to approach, but were thwarted by sudden fog and ice, losing sight of it within hours. When the story reached cartographers in Lisbon, Estotiland appeared on maps for decades, though no subsequent expedition ever confirmed its existence. The nature of Estotiland's disappearance has inspired theories as diverse as magnetic anomalies disrupting compasses to ocean currents, shifting landmasses beneath the waves. Some modern scholars consider that Estotiland represents misidentified portions of Labrador's coast, distorted through repeated retellings and copied maps. Others propose that earlier Norse settlements on Greenland's edge may have glimpsed the Canadian Arctic islands under unusual conditions, interpreting ice flows and peninsulas as a continuous land. Cartographic evidence adds to the intrigue. Gerard Mercator's world map of 1,569 places Estotiland as a considerable stretch of northern land, its rivers and inlets meticulously drawn. The inclusion suggests a seriousness of belief among those who had never set eyes on it themselves. The island appears alongside other regions based on hearsay and prior maps, an early example of how speculation and observation intermingled in shaping European understanding of the far north. Each map reinforces the illusion of permanence, even as ships and crews reported nothing upon arrival. Estotiland's role in maritime culture extended beyond geography. Tales of the island circulated in port towns and shipyards, often presented as warnings to captains, a land both tempting and elusive, promising bounty but offering only disorientation. Sailors recounted glimpsing smoke rising from its forests, or hearing the distant echo of waterfalls. Yet each approach brought only icy waves and the disheartening certainty that the land would dissolve before they could anchor. In contemporary research, Estotiland's phantom presence lingers. Cartographers and historians debate whether it represents a misreading of Norse voyages, a composite of islands along Labrador's coast, or a wholly imagined place nurtured by hope and rumour. Archaeologists have found Norse artefacts in Greenland and Newfoundland, hinting at early exploration that could have inspired whispers of lands further west. The absence of definitive evidence only deepens the island's allure, leaving its reality neither confirmed nor entirely denied. Existing where reality blurs with rumour, Estotiland is marked on maps yet never truly seen. It is a testament to the reach of human curiosity, to the desire to see beyond the horizon and chart the uncharted. Ships may have sought it, fog may have concealed it, and time may have erased it, yet the island lingers, a question that refuses resolution, and a reminder that some mysteries endure longer than the charts meant to define them. And when the northern winds carry whispers across icy waters, one can almost imagine the faint outline of Estotiland rising from the mist, waiting for eyes that will never fully perceive it. Busousard Island, the island that sank twice. The first recorded sighting of Busousard Island came from a German expedition navigating the frigid waters of the South Atlantic near Antarctica in the late 19th century. The island appeared as a jagged outcrop rising from the waves, its dark cliffs contrasting sharply with the pale ice and snow. Within years, explorers attempting to revisit the site reported only open sea, a stretch of ocean that bore no trace of land. The disappearance of Busousard Island immediately earned it a reputation as a phantom of the Southern Ocean, a land that existed and vanished according to the whims of nature or fate. Cartographers responded to these accounts with a mixture of intrigue and skepticism. Initial charts placed Busousard Island carefully, labelling it as a tentative discovery, yet subsequent surveys removed it altogether, convinced that initial reports were errors. The island resurfaced decades later when an expedition from Germany once again sighted land at approximately the same coordinates. This second appearance mirrored the first. Cliffs, rocks and inlets sketched into logs and maps, as if the ocean allowed the island to take form for a fleeting moment. Then, just as before, it vanished, leaving only a stretch of rolling waves and wind-whipped spray. Mariners who attempted to approach Busousard Island described strange phenomena in its vicinity. Some spoke of shifting waters that seemed to swell and contract without apparent reason, while others reported sudden fogs that enveloped the ship entirely, only to clear and reveal nothing but open ocean. One captain wrote of a reflection on the water that suggested cliffs and beaches, yet as the vessel closed in distance, the reflection disappeared. Scientific attempts to explain Busousard Island's vanishings ranged from oceanographic anomalies to volcanic activity. Some theorized that the island consisted of ice and rock formations, temporarily revealed by tides and currents, shifting shape over the years before melting or submerging entirely. Others speculated about tectonic movements beneath the Southern Ocean, or unusual mirages caused by temperature inversions over cold waters. Each explanation seemed plausible in fragments, but could not fully account for the repeated appearance and disappearance, the consistency of coordinates, or the detailed descriptions recorded by observers. The human fascination with Busousard Island persisted, fueled by reports that spanned decades and continents. Explorers included it in narratives of the Southern Ocean, adding a sense of peril and wonder to journeys that were already fraught with danger. German naval logs, British charts, and French expedition reports all mention it, sometimes with hesitation, sometimes with certainty, a testament to its compelling but unreliable presence. Local lore among whalers and seal hunters also acknowledged the island, though with a blend of superstition and observation. Some described the waters around the supposed location as restless, as though currents themselves resisted encroachment. Others told of seeing rocky outcrops beneath the surface at low tide, only to have them vanish with the rising sea. In literary circles, Busousard Island became a symbol of the unknown. Travel writers and geographers referenced it as an illustration of the ocean's mysteries, a cautionary example of how even carefully recorded observation could lead to uncertainty. Maps reproduced in atlases carried the island tentatively, annotated with question marks or labels like "sighted but unverified," emphasizing the precarious line between reality and illusion. Each reappearance renewed interest and debate, and each disappearance deepened the aura of enigma surrounding it. Modern satellite imagery has failed to locate Busousard Island, and yet the island survives in historical records, in journals and charts that document its transient presence. Scientists studying the region recognize unusual tidal patterns, shifting icebergs, and submerged shoals that could partially explain the phenomenon, yet none can account fully for the repeated, precise sightings across decades. The island's elusive nature continues to challenge our understanding of the Southern Ocean, a place where permanence seems optional, and the line between land and sea is blurred by cold and motion. Busousard Island endures as a question that refuses finality. Maps can omit it, explorers can fail to find it, and satellites can confirm its absence. Yet the stories remain, carried in the words of those who glimpsed it and vanished back into history. It is a land both present and absent, remembered in charts yet denied by reality, a reminder that the ocean can withhold truths as easily as it reveals them. Out in the Southern Ocean, Busousard Island could rise from the depths for a moment, only to vanish again beneath the waves. Isla de San Borondon, the wandering mirage of the Canaries. A haze often drifts over the western waters of the Canary Islands, thin and shimmering like a veil that separates the known from the unknown. It is in these fog-laden seas that sailors have claimed to see Isla de San Borondon, a land that appears and disappears without warning, always just beyond reach. The earliest accounts come from fishermen in La Gomera who described a green island rising through the mist, with cliffs and beaches outlined against a sky that seemed impossibly bright. By the time ships attempted to approach, the island would vanish, leaving only the endless ocean and the faint echo of gulls. Folklore suggests the island harbours spirits or divine guardians, ensuring humans rarely set foot there. Some sailors speak of being drawn toward its shores by a strange compulsion, only to find themselves returning to their original course without explanation. The patterns of its appearances are inconsistent. Sometimes it lingers for hours, at other times it dissolves the moment it is sighted. Chroniclers of the 17th century recorded multiple sightings, noting that San Borondon seemed to shift its location subtly, as if guided by invisible currents or forces that defy ordinary understanding. The mapmakers of Spain were intrigued yet frustrated. Early charts placed San Borondon with tentative dotted lines, accompanied by annotations warning of its fleeting presence. Navigators relied on these records cautiously, but many returned from expeditions unable to confirm the island's existence. Reports vary. Some claim verdant valleys and streams, others describe barren cliffs, and a few speak of small settlements visible from a distance. This inconsistency only deepened the mystery, suggesting that the island might not be fixed in form and perhaps not fixed in place. Observers described unusual atmospheric effects surrounding the island. Sailors often noted a distortion of light, where clouds and waves seemed to bend around a central point, revealing what looked like land. The more persistent the gaze, the more the vision dissolved, as if observation itself repelled the island's presence. One account from 1752 tells of a ship captain who circled the supposed coordinates for days, watching hills emerge at dawn and fade by noon. He recorded his frustration meticulously, adding sketches of the outlines that disappeared too quickly to map accurately. Some naturalists and scientists attempted rational explanations. Temperature inversions, mirages, and unusual cloud formations could create illusions of land, they argued. Yet these explanations do not account for repeated, centuries-long sightings from different perspectives, nor the detailed accounts of trees, rivers, and even small settlements. Sailors from various islands reported similar visions independently, sometimes months apart, suggesting that the phenomenon was more than mere imagination or a trick of the eye. Folklore entwines with these sightings. Local stories speak of a monk who saw the island from the cliffs of La Gomera and claimed that only the pure of heart could approach its shores. Whalers and fishermen whispered that the waters around San Borondon were guarded, currents shifting to deter vessels, waves rising to obscure the view. These stories carried a quiet warning. The island was a place of wonder and peril, a land meant to remain untouchable, a fleeting promise glimpsed through mist. The island's elusive nature influenced navigation and exploration in the region. Ships adjusted courses to avoid their supposed position, fearing hazardous shoals or sudden weather changes that often accompanied sightings. Mariners spoke of a sensation that the sea itself protected the land, that attempts to reach it were met with invisible resistance. Over time, the tale of San Borondon became a fixture of maritime culture, a whispered legend that persisted even as maps grew more precise and explorers more determined. In modern times, no satellite or scientific survey has verified the island's existence. Yet San Borondon survives in records, journals, and oral tradition, a testament to the power of perception and the persistence of mystery. Historians and folklorists debate whether it represents a real but submerged landmass, a mirage caused by particular atmospheric conditions, or a purely legendary island born from centuries of imagination. Each interpretation carries weight, yet none fully captures the recurring glimpses reported by those who have sailed these waters. San Borondon remains a liminal space between reality and vision, a land that resists capture on charts or photographs. It is a place of hope and disorientation, a fleeting promise that retreats as one approaches, leaving the observer to wonder if the island ever existed in the form they imagined. When the mist curls across the horizon at dawn, it is possible to glimpse the outline of San Borondon for a heartbeat before it dissolves once more into the wandering fog of the Canaries. Thompson Island, the vanishing land of the Southern Ocean. In the cold, uncharted reaches of the Southern Ocean, sailors once reported a land that seemed to exist only to disappear. Thompson Island appeared in charts of the 19th century as a remote outcrop, a promise of solid ground amidst endless waves and ice. Early explorers described its jagged cliffs and dark shores, claiming it as a potential refuge for ships battered by storms. Yet, when subsequent expeditions sought the island, all they encountered was open water, rolling waves, and the haunting certainty that something had been lost to the ocean. Whispers of Thompson Island spread among whalers and seal hunters who navigated these treacherous waters. One account tells of a captain who glimpsed the island through a haze at dawn, its cliffs stark against the pale light. He attempted to steer closer, but the sea itself seemed to resist him, gusts of wind shifting direction and currents rising in ways that defied expectation. By the time the ship reached the coordinates, the island had vanished, leaving only the expanse of unbroken ocean. The story was recorded in the ship's log, yet it offered no solution, only the lingering sense of something elusive and unwilling to be approached. The inclusion of the island on maps puzzled and divided cartographers of the time. Some included it faithfully, citing repeated sightings and naval reports, while others removed it after failed attempts to verify its existence. The discrepancy between observation and charting fueled speculation. Some suggested that the island was a temporary accumulation of ice and rock, emerging from shifting oceanic currents, while others believed it had been a misidentified iceberg, its form stable enough to be mistaken for land at a distance. None of these explanations could account for multiple sightings over decades, all reported with similar detail and coordinates. Expeditions sent to locate Thompson Island often returned with more questions than answers. Sailors described odd phenomena in the surrounding waters, including unusual reflections and distortions of the horizon. One navigator noted that waves would break as though encountering a shallow shore, yet sounding lines confirmed great depths. Others observed faint vegetation-like shapes at a distance, only for them to vanish when approached. These experiences contributed to a growing reputation that Thompson Island was not merely a missing landmass, but a region in which the ocean itself seemed to toy with perception. Scientific examinations proposed geological or oceanographic causes. Volcanic activity or submerged land might explain brief appearances, while mirages induced by temperature gradients over icy waters could account for visual illusions. Scholars also considered the shifting nature of sea ice, which could rise above the water and mimic cliffs or terrain. Yet the repeated documentation of Thompson Island in ship logs and naval records suggests a pattern beyond coincidence, a place that defies a strictly rational explanation. Thompson Island became a subject of fascination for historians and adventurers alike. Its story was passed down in naval academies, included in atlases, and discussed in journals devoted to maritime discovery. Each mention reinforced the island's paradoxical existence, solid enough to be observed, insubstantial enough to vanish. Writers portrayed it as a symbol of the ocean's power, a place where certainty is an illusion and human expectation yields to natural mystery. Oral histories contributed another dimension to its legend. Sailors told of a faint glow over the waters at night, hinting at shores that could not be reached. Others claim to hear the echo of waves crashing on cliffs that did not exist when the ship neared. These stories emphasize the elusiveness of Thompson Island, portraying it as a land that tests the limits of perception and endurance, a place where the boundary between reality and illusion dissolves under the relentless force of wind and sea. Contemporary surveys and satellite mapping have yet to reveal the location of Thompson Island. Oceanographers have noted unusual currents and submerged shoals in the region, yet these features do not fully explain the vivid reports recorded in 19th century logs. The mystery endures, leaving historians and scientists to reconcile eyewitness accounts with contemporary evidence. Thompson Island survives as a testament to the persistence of the unknown, a reminder that even in the most surveyed regions, the ocean can conceal its secrets. Thompson Island exists in memory and chart, a phantom land that challenges understanding. Ships may sail across the coordinates without interruption, and waves may roll undisturbed over the depths, yet the island lingers in the records of those who saw it, a place both real and unreal, permanent in thought, yet ephemeral in sight. Sometimes, in the fog of the Southern Ocean, the faint outline of Thompson Island seems to emerge, only to vanish again beneath the unyielding waves.